Hi everyone. Welcome to the University of Law Commercial Awareness presentation. My name's Becca Schrod. I work in ULaw's student recruitment and events team. We work with students at events like this, and also on law firm events and graduate recruitment, employability stuff. So as a result, we've got a wide range of knowledge about the kind of things that law firms are looking for in applications. So hopefully this event will give you a good idea of how to develop commercial awareness and how to effectively use it in applications. So I will present, but please add in any questions that you've got to the chat. I know we're going to have a Q&A sort of after the main presentation. So some of you may have already visited us at the ULaw booth and know a bit, but for those of you that don't, we are one of the largest law schools and one of the longest established in the UK. So we've been training solicitors for over 100 years. So all of that knowledge kind of combines to give you a good employability experience and a broad knowledge of commercial awareness as well, which is why we're presenting on that today. So just to start by defining what actually is commercial awareness. So this is a good example from lawcareers.net. So law firms want their lawyers to have commercial awareness so that they can relate to the needs of their clients. This means that you need to know what's going on in the business world. And just to expand on that a little bit further, so some of you might be looking to apply to big commercial firms where you can see that sort of knowledge of what's going on in the business world, what the wider implications of what's happening in the world today are for law firms. But actually, all law firms operate as businesses. So even if you're looking to apply to a firm that specialises in family or a high street firm or whatever it is, commercial awareness is still important because that law firm is still a business. And therefore you need to know how anything that's going on might impact on your firm as a business too. So yeah, whatever kind of law you're interested in, commercial awareness is definitely important to demonstrate during the application process. So just to kind of look into that definition a little bit more. So what is commercial awareness? So it's an awareness of the UK and global economies. I guess more so than ever right now, it's really important to know what the kind of political situation and the economic situation across the world, what does that mean for law? It's an awareness of the business environment, like we've just talked about, the strategic approaches taken by businesses. So to give your clients good advice, you also need to know what are other businesses doing to respond, and most importantly, how to adapt to market changes. So your clients will want to know, how do they make the best out of the situation they're in? So you need to kind of distill all of this information, all of the things going on, into some simple advice for your clients. So commercial awareness in a law practice. So what would your role be as a lawyer and also as a trainee, because that's where you're going to be starting. So the kind of things they're going to be looking for from lawyers. So like I've been talking about a lot, the business world's impact on law firms. What does what's going on mean for you, for your clients? They're going to want you to align your expertise to target sectors. So if you have clients who are in retail, for example, what does what's going on specifically mean for that sector? They also will want you to understand how to ensure profitability. So ultimately, that's what your clients want, that's what the law firm wants. They want to make money. So how do you do that? How do you use your commercial knowledge to give them the best advice that's going to ultimately make them the most money. So that's just a kind of brief definition of some things to consider in commercial awareness. But we're going to look into how do you actually research it. So all law firms are different. The kind of firm that you're applying to is going to dictate the kind of the research that you do. But just to begin with, these are some really, really good resources. So lawcareers.net, they have some really useful articles, blogs, stuff like that on different elements of commercial awareness. It's also a really good idea to start researching the kind of firms you're applying to, and those sectors that they operate in. And that's where Chambers Secret and Legal 500 are really useful, because they kind of list loads of different law firms, the kind of sectors they operate in, the kind of departments that they have, and that will allow you to tailor your research. So if you're applying to firms that are focusing on employment, for example, or they're working in different sectors, maybe it's energy, retail, like we've talked about previously, whatever it is, you can tailor your research to those specific areas, because no one can know everything about everything. You could aim to research every single different department that might be in a law firm, every single business sector out there that a law firm might offer services for clients operating in, but ultimately that could be a full-time job. And I'm sure you're all either studying or working or trying to focus on something else at the same time. So if you identify a few target sectors that you're interested in, that you want to research in, and most importantly, you're applying to firms who are operating in, then you'll be able to really focus that research, and become more of an expert on particular areas. It's better to have knowledge in a few target areas rather than try and broadly know about everything, because like we just talked about, it's not possible. Another useful thing, once you've identified some target firms that you want to apply to, make sure you're following them on social media. So they will quite often post about different clients, different deals that they've been working on, things like that. So commercial awareness in this context is also kind of keeping up to date with what the firms you're applying to are working on. So definitely sort of follow them, see what they're putting out there. And then legal blogs. So Legal Cheek is a really good news site. Again, a good idea to just kind of keep an eye on articles about firms you're applying to. They also have their firms most lists, so there's some good rankings, but also some more fun elements, like who has, well, kind of irrelevant now, everyone's working from home, but stuff like the best facilities, best canteens, some fun stuff, but also still interesting to know. So definitely these are some good places to start researching. So some areas to consider. So growth markets and sectors. So especially now, there have definitely been some major winners and losers out of COVID. Who knew that Zoom would potentially be the most well-recognized brand name in the world this time last year? But there we go. So looking at markets that are growing, some areas that are declining, keeping an eye on that kind of thing. And then some law firm specific areas, thinking about how a partner would actually pitch to a client. So looking at the firms you're applying to and thinking, what are their strengths and maybe what are their potential weaknesses? And also thinking about who the firm's current clients are. So looking at their websites, seeing what the information they put out there, and who their target clients maybe would be as well. So the point of all of this really is looking at what are you actually interested in. These are some things to consider. but ultimately it has to be a sector that you're interested in. It has to be a law firm that has departments that you're interested in practicing in. Shape your research around it. If you have always aspired to be a commercial finance lawyer, but actually reading the FT to boost your commercial awareness has bored you to tears, then maybe that's not the best sector for you to focus in. You can still be working for a large commercial firm in a different department that maybe suits your needs and your interests better. So the best examples of your knowledge of commercial awareness are going to come from your own interests and experiences. The other thing to look at is knowing what lawyers actually do is critical. So commercial awareness is all well and good, but you need to know what would you do with that knowledge as a trainee solicitor. So that's where the research side of actually reading the posts that law firms put out there, seeing the kind of work they've done for clients is really critical. Websites like lawcareers.net, for example, and our own, we do at ULaw, we've got some posts about this, but looking at day in the life of a trainee or day in the life of a solicitor post, that will start giving you an idea as well of what the kind of tasks day to day you'd be doing are as well. So the point of all of this commercial awareness research is teaching you how to actually put yourself in the shoes of a lawyer. So some other things to consider. So when you're sort of looking at researching the different law firms, some areas to look at are, what are the law firm's 5-year plans? So they might have on their website the different things that they're working on. They may ask you as a commercial awareness question, what do you think the biggest challenges for this firm in the next 5 years would be? So getting an understanding of where they think they're going will help you to answer that question. Also looking at the role of technology and innovation. We're going to cover that in a bit more detail later on in the presentation. The sector approach, so I've talked about different sectors a lot, but most firms will either focus on practice areas or they'll focus on different sectors and really work for clients throughout that sector. So your research will depend on what kind of firm they are. And the last thing to think about is the more kind of strategic approach. So putting yourself in the shoes of the managing partner, what would your 5-year plan for the firm be? So a really good way of kind of figuring out all of this information that you've now got about various different firms, various different sectors, how do you actually kind of distill it into something that's going to be useful for you during applications or interview prep? So a really good thing that I would recommend is a SWOT analysis. So when you're preparing or maybe making notes on a few different firms that will help inform your application process, do a SWOT analysis for the firm. So looking at their strengths. So perhaps if they're operating in a sector that is really growing at the moment, maybe something like energy, there's a huge focus on kind of different, more sustainable sources and a lot of business coming out of that. That might be a strength. Weaknesses, so perhaps if they have clients operating in retail at the moment, if they've got physical shops, they're probably struggling, so that might be an area of weakness. It could be not the sectors they're operating in, but it might be some other commercial weaknesses. So maybe there's not a lot of information on their website about their different clients. Whatever it is. Opportunities, so is there anything in that 5-year plan that you see as a huge opportunity for the firm? And then threats, so are there any firms that are similar to them that are doing something better? Are there any growing firms that are all of a sudden a threat? Maybe they're a more traditional kind of UK-based firm and they're seeing big threats from US firms, that's been a growing trend. It might be a threat from mergers. There have been a lot of big mergers in recent years and potentially a lot still to come. So whatever it is, kind of outlining through your research all of the different things that outline, and that will mean that at a glance, when you're doing your research, you can just look at, right, what are all the commercial awareness things I've researched for this firm on one bit of paper. And yet just look at as well within that whether it's an internal strength, so strengths and weaknesses, they're all internal things from the firm, and then the external things are the opportunities and the threats. Another good technique when you're doing your research is to look at a pestle analysis. So you might have already done this like during your kind of studies, but it's a really good tool for analysing perhaps a different firm, a different sector, a different area of law, whatever it is. It's good for kind of, again, just putting on one side of paper some information about all of your research. So the pestle, the P is for political. So are there any government policies that might impact the particular sector or area of law that the firm's operating in? Perhaps do they have offices in international markets where there's maybe some political instability? Election years, for example, obviously the US is a huge one. Tax policies, labour laws in those jurisdictions. Are there any trade restrictions? Obviously, with Brexit kind of around the corner, that's going to be a huge area as well. Feels like it's been a huge area for years, but it remains one. The economic side, so economic growth or lack thereof at the moment. What's the exchange rate amongst the different jurisdictions the firm's working in, interest rates, unemployment rates, things like that. The social side, so population growth rate, age distribution of the country. Are there any cultural barriers in different jurisdictions that you're practicing in, things like that. The technological side, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk about the sort of law tech stuff in a bit, but in the industry that and sector that the firm's operating in, what kind of innovation and automation is there? Are there big technological changes in that industry? The legal side, obviously the side that you guys are going to know the most about, but a whole host of things depending on the area and sector, but there's a few there. So things like employment laws, copyright and patent laws, consumer protection, stuff like that. And then the ecological side, obviously environmental concerns are huge for large corporations at the moment, but looking at climate change, environmental policies where you're practicing, that kind of thing. So definitely do a pestle analysis for some of the sectors or practice areas that you're looking to practice in, and for the firms. So just looking a bit further about what law firms actually want. So a really good one to just remember at all times is clients want a commercial, not academic answer to their legal problems. So they kind of see it as a given that you have a good academic understanding of the law. That's your job. You're a lawyer. But they don't necessarily care about the nitty-gritty legal advice that you're giving them. They actually want to know commercially what's going to be the best decision for my business. Another one to take into account, commercial awareness, is knowing about how a law firm operates. So that's why definitely those sort of day in the life of a lawyer profiles are really key, just to see day to day, what are you actually going to be doing for your clients. And commercial awareness is not about knowledge, it's a way of thinking. That's a really important one as well. You can't possibly know everything there is to know about different commercial issues, but once you start researching and looking into them, you'll start thinking more commercially and start thinking like a lawyer, and that is kind of the most important bit and the key in all of this. So another thing, I talked about looking on firm websites and looking at who their clients are. How would you actually use that knowledge in an application? So don't just list it. That's number one. If they've asked you a question around who are the clients, what kind of advice would you give them? So look at recent deals on the website. How does the market actually impact their client? Have opinions as well. They may ask you about some of the challenges affecting their client's business, so have an opinion on it. Be able to pick some examples. Pick examples that you feel comfortable in discussing. You may have in front of you a partner or a lawyer who works in that particular team. So it's got to be something that you're comfortable talking about and also being questioned about. You don't want to just throw a name out there that you've read on the website but don't have much detail to give on, because you may be questioned on it. And also think about, within those client lists, who are their competitors? Is there anything that they do better that you might advise your client on? So it's not about regurgitating the technical detail that might be on that law firm's website, but it's about demonstrating your opinion in a way that shows your commercial awareness. We talked a lot about understanding what lawyers actually do. So this is a common area tested by firms in selection process. What do lawyers do on a typical day? So thinking about, what would your client's expectations of you be, and what would your partner who's looking after your department expectations of you be as well? Articulate examples of discrete tasks done. So that means talking through, well, perhaps on that day I would be doing some research for a client. I might be calling a client and writing an opinion for them. I might be, I don't know, doing some filing for my department. I might be supporting a task that the partner's given me. Whatever it is, outline exactly what you think you'd be doing. If you're unsure, then speak to lawyers and do research. So events like this, where you've got trainees in the event chat for different firms, are perfect opportunities to do that. So asking them, what was yesterday like for you? What kind of things did you do? What's a typical day in your life? So yeah, basically, when you're talking through understanding what lawyers do, you don't want to just say, I spent a week at firm name in their litigation team. You want to say, what did you do? Did you do some research tasks? Did you attend a client meeting? Did you draft anything for a client? Were there any clients that you interacted with? Did you have any direct client contact? That kind of thing. So basically just demonstrating that you understand what the role of a lawyer in their business would involve. So just to wrap up, because I'm aware we haven't got too much time before the questions come. Looking at globalization, if you're applying to global firms, they may ask you a question around where would you expand, or what country would you open a new office in, that kind of thing. So the kind of approach that you might take to answering a question like this is researching how would they deal with selling their brand in a saturated market. So some things to consider there. How would they attract local talent to work for them? How can they ensure that the firm culture extends to new locations, and also do a bit of research to understand what's meant by best friends network. So maybe you'd recommend not actually opening an entire office in that new jurisdiction, but working with a local best friend firm, they're known as. So understanding what those are and why law firms might use them, what the pros and cons are. So those are just some things to consider on a globalization question. Next one we're quickly going to have a look at is growth. So questions that you may be asked on this around growing a business. So that means you have to have a plan that will ensure the business expertise and clients grow with it. So like we've discussed a bit earlier, a lot of firms are diversifying their business with mergers or are maybe open to it. So consider the upheaval that might come with that kind of a move, but understand why law firms or businesses might do it. Maybe have a discussion about merger examples. So maybe CMS is a good example of a big merger recently. BCLP, so formerly known as Berwin Leighton Paisner, and now Brian Cave Leighton Paisner. So having a look at that, that's a good example of a US and UK firm merging. The last thing we're going to have a little look at is innovation and technology, because that's a huge area for law firms at the moment. So the way the role of a lawyer is done is evolving and changing. So it's really important to recognise this with applications. And that's the case from your kind of huge international firms all the way to high street firms who may have a client management system now. It's changing a lot. So some things to have a look at within this: innovation hubs. Denton's is a useful example to have a look at. Freshfields have also got an innovation centre. So these are areas where they're really looking at different technologies that they can use. So some areas of technology that are impacting law: RPA. So this is robotic process automation. So whenever there are processes that are rules-based and repeatable, you can automate it. So an example of this being used kind of in real life at the moment: in employment tribunal preparation, auto-populated Ministry of Justice forms. It's used in conveyancing. So have a look at what is it, what does it mean for the firm you're applying to. Machine learning is another huge area. So it's a type of artificial intelligence that basically teaches computers to learn without being explicitly programmed. So kind of like a spam filter is a good example of that. But within law, machines can be taught to identify concepts and clauses that the firm specifies within documents and contracts that might take a human team months to review. Computers can review them within seconds, churn out some information for you then to review, which obviously saves a great deal of time. So this is an area that a lot of law firms are using now. So yeah, there's so many different areas within legal tech. We do at the University of Law, if you sign up in our booth, we have a number of different legal tech talks coming up as well. But it's definitely an area to research, see what it means kind of in the context of the firm that you're applying to. So just to wrap up, some questions that you might get asked that are a good kind of thing to maybe research and put some answers down to for the firms you're applying to. So a main one: who do you see as our main competitors? What do you see as the main challenges facing city law firms today? Or it might be the main challenges for the particular firm you're applying to. Tell us about a story you've read in the news recently and something you found interesting about it. What are your main ways of following the news? Tell me about a recent legal story that you've been keeping up to date with. So these are just examples of some of the kind of typical commercial awareness questions you might get asked at interview or potentially during the application form. So during your research, maybe kind of do a mind map of answers that you'd potentially use to those questions, and that will help you test where you're at in commercial awareness for that firm as well. Are there any areas that, having tried to answer this question, you need to do a bit more in-depth research into? And finally, I'm a massive fan of a podcast. This is a really good way of just kind of keeping up to date on what's happening in the world, building up that commercial awareness in a kind of more fun way, I guess. So it doesn't necessarily have to be sitting down reading a paper. It could be while you're going on a walk, or once we get back to real life, while you're on your way to work or uni or whatever it is, listen to a podcast. There's some really good business focused ones. I know in the last Q&A, if there was one, I caught the end of that, a podcast was mentioned there. But TED Talks, business, really good one. Financial Times Startup Stories, the Guardian Business Podcast. There's some good law ones as well. So yeah, just kind of a good way of keeping up to date. If you're interested in working for a US one, there's a really good news one called Start Here. So yeah, just kind of figuring out what you're interested in and how to research it. So I think that was everything I had. So ready for the Q&A.
Thank you, Becca. I've just jumped on, so I thought I would got lots of questions to ask you. So yeah, I'm Lizzie from Rate My Placement, if anyone hasn't watched any of the other presentations so far. So I've been looking at the chat. Hello. Looking at the chat and tried to kind of pull together some themes for you for the Q&A. So overall, yeah, thank you. Really interesting. And I love the use. I have to say, it took me back to my uni days. SWOT, PESTLE.
Yeah. They're still useful, like, once you leave uni, for sure.
Yeah, it's really good to do it like that. All the theory that then you can start to actually map in things that are happening to you now and what's happening in the world. So really, really like that. And a few questions just to pick up on those. So we had a few questions around the best way to use SWOT. So what's the best way to find out a firm's strengths and weaknesses, would you say?
Yeah, that's a good question, because obviously if you're just researching on the firm's website, you're probably not going to find any weaknesses there, because that's their sort of advertising tool. So definitely strengths. Look on their website, their social media. You'll get a good idea of the kind of clients they're working for, the kind of deals they're doing, the kind of outward strengths that they put out there. It might be to do with like the firm's culture or that kind of thing. But for researching weaknesses, I think websites like Chamber Student Guide, Legal Cheek, the ones that give maybe a bit more of an unbiased profile of the firm, are a good way of starting figuring out weaknesses. And it could also be based on your own sort of commercial awareness. So if they're taking a sector approach and they're operating in sectors that maybe have been hard hit by the current economic situation, maybe that could be a weakness. So yeah, kind of reading between the lines on the kind of work they do as well is a good way.
Yeah, really good advice there. I love, you're not going to find weaknesses on the website, are you? So really,
yeah.
Excellent. So a few others that we've got. So there's a few first year students, and what we've got is, what would you recommend that they do to help strengthen their future applications?
So I think if you're a first year, then it's definitely like never too early. It's a really good time to start thinking of commercial awareness, because you know, one thing I sometimes see, and it's fine, there's still time, but sometimes I come across third years who are like, I've got interviews coming up, or I've got applications coming up, how to become commercially aware, and it's not going to happen overnight. So just kind of setting aside some time to just like open the BBC News app every day, look on legal news sites. Guardian Legal's a good one that I like, but there's loads of them out there. So just setting aside like half an hour every week to kind of have a look at the news, see if there's any articles that are of interest to you, if there's any sectors that you find interesting. Again, like just kind of build up a little file of stuff that you're interested in. Maybe it's just a Google Doc of some articles that you found interesting that month. So just kind of building up very slowly. It doesn't have to be like, right, I'm going to spend a day becoming commercially aware now. Just like little and often, building it up, following firms that you want to work for on social media, and kind of keeping an eye on what they're up to. It all adds up. So, you know, within like 6 months, a year, you'll probably just naturally be more commercially aware than you were at the start.
Yeah, And I loved your point around podcasts, because where we are now, there's so many different ways of gaining information, and podcasts are so great just to, if you're going for a walk or something, listening to a podcast and just getting your information in different ways. So
yeah, I love a podcast. That's it, because during your walk you could, I don't know, listen to nothing or listen to some music or whatever, but if you're going for that walk anyway, you could listen to a podcast and kind of build your commercial awareness.
Yeah, definitely, really good. And just in terms of picking up, I loved your point around looking at globalization, growth, innovation and tech, all these things that are happening around us. And I just wondered around researching innovation and tech. Is there anything that you would suggest specifically for innovation and tech that students research, or where they research innovation and tech?
Yeah, so a really good site is Legal Geek. They do a load of student-focused tech events, and they have a load of really useful information as well. So if you're kind of starting from a base of not knowing anything about tech but being interested in it, they're really good. We are doing a student event with them in, I think, October. We've also got a few legal tech talks, so yeah, have a look at them, have a look at our site as well. There's quite a lot of information there. We've got a few like 5-minute YouTube videos on different areas in legal tech, which are quite a nice starting point as well on our ULaw YouTube channel, which I think is on the slide.
Brilliant. And we will have all the slides featured afterwards. So if anyone's worried about that, we'll pop them on our site to make sure that everyone can access them and all the content. So I've got a few in the chat, actually. They're coming through all the time. It's great. So what do you think the main challenges and opportunities facing the legal industry in the future? Ooh.
That's a great question. And broad. I mean, I think in terms of just general economic challenges, obviously at the moment there are huge challenges on the horizon with current situation, furlough coming to an end, the impacts of COVID, the impacts of Brexit, which I feel like we've kind of forgotten about a little bit because the news is so dominated by one thing. But obviously with trade deals being negotiated and that kind of thing, it's going to be a big one. But I think probably the main challenge and opportunity is definitely the legal tech side of things. So the role of a lawyer is just going to massively change in the coming years, especially for big city firms where, in the past there were huge teams reviewing contracts, or I know, some of our tutors have said in the past, like, 2 lawyers had 1 secretary and now there's 1 for the whole department because so many things are automated. So I think there's not necessarily going to be less jobs, but jobs might be different. So one area is the role of a legal technologist, so someone who knows law but also knows tech and knows how to kind of program those AIs, because they're only as good as the information that you put in. Also, a big maybe threat but opportunity is that concept of it's only as good as the information that you put in. So there's some ethical questions, because obviously we all have unconscious biases, but you don't want those biases to be reflected in your AI because of the human that put the information in. So yeah, there's some really interesting stuff within tech. So definitely have a look on Legal Geek. They have some good stuff about all of this.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you start talking about that, because just think even in the last 10 years how much has changed. And I guess that's a really good resource to try and find out literally now what's happening, because things are changing so fast every day. So yeah, great tip there. So in terms of another question, I think we had another one on here. How do you highlight your commercial awareness on your CV? So a very practical one.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I think a good way is, before I worked in law, I had no idea about just how different a legal CV is, because I think outside of law, putting like a single event or something like that would be a bit odd, but within a legal CV, that's all good information. So definitely a section about your kind of events and stuff that you've done. So maybe legal experience, you can put stuff like this event, for example, if you went to a Legal Geek event. All of that stuff kind of builds up and shows that you're actively doing things to demonstrate your commercial awareness. But another way is probably if you have a little personal statement at the start, outlining some of your interests as well. But having said all that, I think probably the best way to highlight commercial awareness is either, depending on the size of firm you're applying to, if you're applying to a big one that have an application form, that's definitely the free text questions. That's the way to really highlight just how commercially aware you are.
Yeah, lots of different tips to do on your CV. I was just going to say as well, you mentioned about attending this event. So in the email that we're going to send out after this event, we actually have an image that all students who are listening, who are going to receive that email, it will be something that you can post on your LinkedIn profile just to show to this. Yeah, because we totally understand and want to help showcase that commercial experience as well. So look out for that email. It'll go, I think, tomorrow evening. So cool, lots of lovely questions. So I just wanted to touch on just a little bit about Uni of Law, actually. So what can you study at the Uni of Law?
That's a good question. So yeah, I mean, we have loads of different courses. So if a lot of you in the chat are interested in pursuing a career in law and want to train to be a solicitor or a barrister, then we do the training courses, so LPC, and we'll also be doing SQE courses, the bar practice course. We do law conversion courses, so if you're interested in becoming a lawyer but you studied a different subject at your undergrad, then we do those courses. And we also do masters, so if you don't want to become a solicitor or barrister but you want to work in law in some kind of way, then we also do masters in loads of areas, including MSc in legal tech, if you're interested in pursuing maybe one of those new legal tech roles. So yeah, loads of different courses. Definitely come and visit us in our booth after, and we can give you a bit more specific information.
Excellent. Yeah, and you've got a lovely breakout session after this in your booth. So any questions that haven't been answered, feel free to jump into Uni of Law's booth, and you can.
Yeah, I'm going to head over there.
And I think, I mean, there's most of the questions we've answered because we kind of repeated a few. There's probably one that's just come in live, so I'll ask it if we've got a couple of minutes left. So what would you say is the most effective way of using LinkedIn? Just interesting.
Yeah, I think it's great. I've seen probably since we've all gone online a bit more, so many students using LinkedIn, which is brilliant. So I think one way is just kind of building up your network and your presence on LinkedIn, because the kind of people that you meet at online events like this are potentially your colleagues of the future that you're going to be working with. So just kind of building up a network is a good way. But also I think just engaging with people's posts. So if you follow different law firms, what they're putting out there, I think as well, I wouldn't hammer people with messages if, I don't know, mate, if you don't know quite what you're interested in, but if you have a firm that you specifically really want to apply to, perhaps you have met one of their trainees in a booth at an event like this, then I think definitely connecting with them as well. But I would just personalize a message to them. So don't just randomly try and add them, but if you add a message to say, oh, thank you for answering my question at the RMP event, it was great to meet you. I was just wondering, could you tell me a bit more about what your favourite seat has been so far, or I'm interested in applying, how did you find the application process, or whatever. So if there are a few people that you want to connect with, that's a really useful way. And then it's also quite a nice opportunity to name drop in applications. So they may ask you, what inspired you to apply to this firm? Definitely say, I met one of your trainees, whatever their name is, at a virtual event. They really inspired me. I was really interested in the work they're doing. That's another good way of using it.
It's a really good point, actually, because so many recruiters, pretty much most recruiters have LinkedIn. So it's how do you stand out? Because they
Yeah.
probably have quite a few messages. So it's how are you marketing yourself in that LinkedIn message? So yeah, really good tips there. Brilliant. Well, I think that is pretty much all of the questions. There's a very quick one here. Does the Uni of Law do a short course on intellectual property? Very specific. Not sure if you know that one, or maybe that's one for Boo.
We don't have short courses, but it is included in some of our courses like the LPC. And we do also have a few like tester courses on FutureLearn at the moment as well. So if you kind of want to have a look before taking the plunge and actually studying, then that's a good one to look at.
Awesome. Sounds really good. Well, on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much. That was really interesting. Loads of great insights. As I mentioned, you're going to be on your booth now. So anyone who's got any other questions, please head over there, and look forward to seeing you all later.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks, Lizzie.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.